And the first lesson is about water, but in the book, there is a part before water. It's about the chemical bonds. And I like always to begin or to remind you about the chemical bonds because we use these bonds in our unit 1. So I'd like to mention a brief idea about the bonds from chemistry as far as I know, that we have 3 types of bonds: the ionic bond, and we have the covalent bond, and we are going to see here the hydrogen bond. Later on, I'm going to introduce another bond which is called sulfur-sulfur bond. Later on, not now. What is the ionic bond? It is similar, somewhat similar to the hydrogen bond, but there is a slight difference. Ionic bond is nothing but electrostatic attraction force between highly positive ions and highly negative ions. But for hydrogen bonds, it's an electrostatic attractive force between slightly positive ions and slightly negative ions. This is the only difference. And there is another difference that we use only for the hydrogen bond, is that it has a symbol. Whenever you find a dotted line like this, this represents a hydrogen bond. But for the ionic bond, you just put a dot. For example, if you write sodium chloride, you just put a dot between the sodium and the chloride because this dot represents the ionic bond. And the sodium is highly positive while the chloride is highly negative. It means that there is a strong charge on each one of them. About the hydrogen bond, so if I have a slightly positive charge, I always write it like this. This letter is called delta. It's a Greek letter and it's called delta. So when you find delta positive, it means that the positive charge on this atom or on this ion is slight charge or a weak charge. And here I write delta negative. It means that the charge is weak. Now, what about covalent bonds from your chemistry? It is sharing of electrons. So if I have delta, no, it's not a D. It's a Greek letter that looks exactly like this. It's not an S, like this, okay? Not an S, yeah, Habiba. It looks like this. It is closed from here, okay? It is closed. The S is open. Halas? We just write it like this. Delta, we don't say delta even. We just write it like this. Okay. Type. Let me erase this. Okay. What about the covalent bonds? Covalent bonds is sharing, sharing of electrons. It means, for example, that every atom, if this is the atom, and this is another one, atom number 1, atom number 2. So every atom is going to share with the equal number of electrons in order, because they need all these electrons. I'm going to explain this with water now. Type. What's the symbol of covalent bond? It is just a continuous line. So if the line is dotted, you will know immediately that this is the hydrogen bond. If the line is continuous, then this is a covalent bond. And that's all what I wanted to explain about the bonds. And we are not going to use this one, but we're going to use the covalent and the hydrogen bonds. And later on, I'm going to introduce another bond, which is the sulfur-sulfur bond. Now let's go to our first lesson, which is about water. Now here, water, as we all know, is formed, if you want to write it, you will write it H2O. Also, I can write it HOH. This bond is a covalent bond, of course, because it is a continuous line. Like when they looked at the water molecule under an electron microscope, they found out that the oxygen atom is found in the middle and the hydrogen atoms are found on both sides, and the bonds, the covalent bonds, are forming an angle between them 105 and 4.5 degrees. This is the shape of the connection of the hydrogens together with the oxygen in the water molecule, that the bonds, they make an angle. Also, they discovered that whenever we find a lot of water molecules, a certain bond, which is the hydrogen bond, is going to arise between them. But what does this mean? Now, suppose I have here, this is oxygen molecule, and these are the oxygen atom, I'm sorry, and these are the hydrogen atoms, and they are forming an angle between, let me do this, they are forming an angle between them like this. Okay, now here this is the bond between the oxygen and the hydrogens. As I just said, this is a covalent bond, like this. Now, what happens when there is a covalent bond? Let's return back to chemistry. We know that oxygen is 816. 8, of course, this is the atomic number or the number of protons, and it also represents the number of electrons. If I want to arrange the 8 electrons on the energy levels of oxygen, I'm going to arrange them like this. In the first energy level will be 2 electrons, and in the other one, it's going to be 6. Now, who can tell me how many electrons oxygen needs in order to resemble neon? I think you have taken this in chemistry, of course. 2 electrons, thank you, Saif. It means that this oxygen, it needs 2. But what about hydrogen? Hydrogen has only 1 electron and 1 neutron, of course, and no neutrons, I'm sorry. It has 1 electron. Habiba, how many electrons does the hydrogen atom need in order to resemble helium? How many electrons the hydrogen needs? If you're not sure, it's not a problem. Just say, I'm not sure. Can you answer this question, Salman? How many? بصي يا حبيبة, always the atoms, they need electrons in order to resemble the inert gases. Helium, it has 2 electrons here. Hydrogen has only 1. For how many electrons does hydrogen need? Only 1. Yes, Saif. Yes, yes. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Type. This means that the oxygen needs 2 and hydrogen needs 1. And we have 2 hydrogen atoms in the water molecule. So hydrogen is going to share with its only electron, and the other hydrogen will share with its only electron. Oxygen needs 2, so it's going to give 2 in order to take 2. So oxygen will share here in the intersection area by 2 electrons. Now, at the beginning, oxygen had 6. So here I have 1 electron, 2 electrons, 3, 4, and then 5 and 6. Hydrogen, it has only 1 electron, so it was put inside the intersection point. This is called the sharing of electrons. طب why? Why do oxygen share with 2 electrons? Because it needs to. Now let us count the number of electrons for oxygen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It needs 2. So it has taken the 2, yes, in order to give 8. So what about the hydrogen? It needed 1 in order to be 2, like helium. So it shared with 1. Look here, it took 1 from oxygen. So they are 2, yes, plus 1 electron will give me 2 electrons. And for the other hydrogen atom, the same happens. Type. This means that there are electrons that were shared between the oxygen and the hydrogens. But here in water molecule, there is something abnormal that happens, and it happens only for water molecules, is that these electrons that are shared are slightly shifted towards the oxygen atom. So if I want to draw this correctly, I'm going to select this one to increase this hydrogen. Okay, in order to show you how are the electrons shifted. Here I have the electron of oxygen, and here is the electron of hydrogen. They are shifted towards the oxygen, not towards the hydrogen. But what is the charge of electrons, ya Habiba? What is the charge on the electrons? Negative or positive? Negative, very good, very good. This means that because the negative charges or the electrons, they are shifted towards oxygen, this will allow the oxygen to be slightly negative, more than the hydrogen, because both of them, they have electrons in the intersection area. But because the negativity is shifted towards the oxygen, so the oxygen has more negative charge than the hydrogen. That's why I say that the oxygen is slightly negative, and I write it like this. But what about the hydrogen? Will it be negative or slightly positive, ya Salman? Can you think with me, please? What about the hydrogen? Is it going to be slightly negative or slightly positive? Because it has lost a part.
Slightly positive.
Positive, excellent. So here, hydrogen, I write it like this, will be slightly positive. And the same thing happens to the next hydrogen. Here, I'm going to enlarge it a bit. And again, the electrons will be shifted towards the oxygen. This is one, and this is the other one. So again, this will add to the slightly negativity of the oxygen, while the hydrogen here again will be slightly positive. So let me erase all this, and I'm left with this water molecule in the middle. Now here you can see that there are 2 different charges. Suppose this is one pole of the water molecule and this is the other pole. We say that because each pole of the water molecule has a different charge than the other, so I call the water molecule a dipolar molecule. Di means 2. It means that the water molecule has 2 poles. One of them is slightly negative and the other one is slightly positive. So when I describe the water molecule, I say that it is dipolar. And the same is the case with all the water molecules that are found, for example, in a glass of water, in a river, or in the sea. All the water molecules, they are dipolar. And we say that water has a polarity. Not diatomic, no, because this water molecule is triatomic. Dipolar means that there are 2 poles. This is one pole and this is the other pole. Yani suppose you have a circle like this, Yusuf. Okay, so or the Earth. This is one pole and this is the other pole. This is the northern pole, this is the southern pole. In the Earth, we have two poles, northern and southern. So anything that's found above, it's called a pole, and anything that's found below is called another pole. And because the water molecule has this shape of the hydrogen and oxygen, so this is one pole and this is another pole. Dipolar does not refer to the number of atoms, but it refers to the number of poles of the water molecule, or the position of the oxygen and the position of the hydrogens. You got it now yourself? Okay, right. Because water is a dipolar molecule, we say that water molecules have polarity. This is the meaning of polarity, or why we say that the water molecule has polarity, because it has two poles. One of them is slightly negative while the other pole is slightly positive. Why is this important? This serves a lot in all the properties of water. Again, why? Let me draw this water molecule like this. This is oxygen, which is slightly negative, and here I have hydrogens. Each one of them is slightly positive. This is one water molecule. Let me draw another water molecule. This is the oxygen, slightly negative, and this is the hydrogen, slightly positive. And let me put another one. This is a water molecule. These are, of course, slightly negative, slightly positive, and slightly positive. What happens between the different charges? Who knows? When I have unequal charges or different charges, what's going to happen between them? Attraction or repulsion? Attraction. Very good. So, as you can see here, that I have a positive charge, even it is slightly positive, yes, and I have a negative charge here. This is going to make an attraction force between the hydrogen and the oxygen of another water molecule. So if this is water molecule number 1, water molecule number 2, water molecule number 3. Here in this molecule, I have slightly positive hydrogen, while on the other water molecule, there is slightly negative oxygen. So there will be a force of attraction between them. طيب Salman, is this force of attraction strong or weak? Strong attraction or weak attraction?
Weak attraction.
Weak, very good. Very good, Habiba. Yes, weak. And remember when I was explaining, mentioning something about the bonds at the beginning, I told you that the hydrogen bond is a weak electrostatic attraction force. So this weak attraction is because I have here a weak charge and a weak charge. Well, in spite, yes, they are weak, but they are different. So there will be an attraction. But because they are weak, the attraction will be weak. So this weak electrostatic attraction force is between the slightly positive and slightly negative, and it has a name. It is the hydrogen bond. And as you can see, when I drew it with its symbol, a dotted line. If I draw it as a continuous line like this, this will be wrong, because the continuous line is for the covalent bond, not for the hydrogen. But what about these two water molecules? I have here water number 2, and we have here slightly positive hydrogen, and here, no, I must not do it like this. I must draw this molecule a bit lower down. Yes, because I will not be able to put the bonds. Here I'm going to put the oxygen. Let me put the hydrogens here. So I have here slightly negative, slightly positive, slightly positive. So I'm going to find again a hydrogen bond between these. And here, slightly positive and slightly negative. But what does this mean? It means that all the water molecules, they are attached together by hydrogen bonds. If I pulled one molecule, the rest of the molecules are going to be pulled after them. If you have a glass of water and you spilled water, for example, in the sink, are you spilling one molecule? No, all the water is going to follow. This is because of the presence of these hydrogen bonds that bind all the water molecules together. And because of this hydrogen bond, most of the properties of water are due to this hydrogen bond. Most of them, as I'm going to explain now. I would like to show you a picture before I start the properties of water. Look at this picture here. Here I have a water molecule and it's joined by another water molecule by hydrogen bond. If I looked at this, it is joined to this by hydrogen bond and also to this by hydrogen bond and also to this by hydrogen bond. It means that all the water molecules, they are joined together by this hydrogen bonds. Here you have one molecule is joined to three or even to, yes, to 1, 2, 3, 4, to 4 hydrogen water molecules around them. The presence of this hydrogen bond gives the water certain properties or certain importance. Now, what's the importance of the water molecule? Let's begin by the first importance, which is that water is a universal solvent. Very good. Now here, the word universal has nothing to do with the universe. No, universal here means that it can dissolve most of the chemicals that we know. And of course, solvent means that it is a material in which other compounds can dissolve, or dissolvent or dissolving molecule. Right. We know that a solution is formed of solvent and solute. So water here is the solvent. Drinking. What do you mean, Saif, by drinking? The
Water is
importance of
important
water?
for drinking.
Yes, of course, but this is from our in lifestyle. But according to the medical or the biochemical, sorry, not medical, the biochemical point of view, I'm going to mention the chemical properties of water, okay? Yes, of course, water is important in drinking. We cannot live without it. And we cannot live without it because of other reasons I'm going to mention now. Here, the word universal solvent, it means that water dissolves so many compounds. And we know, again, from chemistry that we have two types of compounds. We have ionic compounds, like, for example, sodium chloride, because it has ions, and covalent compounds. And these covalent compounds, for example, like sugars and other molecules, of course, that I'm going to explain now. This means that water can dissolve ionic compounds, most of the ionic compounds, but some covalent compounds. Right. Here, I'm going to show you how can water dissolve, for example, important for the metabolic. طبعا يا حبيبة, excellent, bravo. But do you know, ya Habiba, that in metabolic reaction, we are working with covalent compounds as we're going to learn. Bravo, bravo. That's why I just said to Saif that this dissolving property is very important to our lives, because Our cells cannot work without water, our metabolic reactions. Now here, let me give you, I'll show you how can sodium chloride dissolve in water. Let me show you this picture for dissolving. Here it is. Now, if you can see, of course, yes, of course, but you know, of course, that most of our metabolic reactions happen in the cytoplasm because of the presence of water and because of presence of other materials that are needed. Now, if you looked here, these are water molecules. Of course, they are not attached with hydrogen bonds. And this is sodium chloride, a lot of sodium chloride. As you can see here, that sodium is positively charged, chloride is negatively charged, all of them. And I have here on water molecule, again, slightly positive charge on the hydrogens and slightly negative on the oxygen. So because we have different charges on the sodium chloride and different charges on the water, it means that the components of water molecule is going to are going to attract the components of sodium chloride. Now, what does this mean? Look at this picture. In dissolving, as if the water molecule is entering in between the ions. This is dissolving. Water molecules are surrounding all the ions from all aspects. Now look at this picture. Look at the chloride. How is it surrounded by water molecules? Look here, the chloride is negatively charged, while the hydrogens, they are slightly positive. It means that this positivity is important because it was directed or attracted the negative chloride. But what about the other picture? The negative oxygen or the slightly negative oxygen, they were attracting the sodium. That's why I told you that water molecules, they enter in between the ions, because I have here positive, negative charges on the oxygen, slightly negative and positive, so the sodium is going to attract, or the oxygen is going to attract the sodium towards it because of the opposite charges that they have, while the hydrogens will attract the chloride because it is opposite in its charge. This is the process of dissolving or dissolution for ionic compounds. What about covalent compounds? Covalent compounds are always larger than ionic molecules, of course. For example, I have something like sugar. Let me change this color, sugar. We know that sugars, they can dissolve in water to give us a sugary solution. Of course, sugar is the solvent and water is the solute and water is the solvent. So this will give me a solution. This is easy to be done. And when I am explaining the sugars, I am going to tell you how they are attracted to water. But we have other covalent compounds, like what? Like starch, for example. Starch does not dissolve in water, but when it is added to water, it gives me something that is called a colloid. Now, what's the meaning of this? If I have, for example, a glass of water, and I want you to try this after the session. I have a glass of water, and I'm going to add to it some flour. Of course, flour is formed of starch, and we just stir this flour in water. You will see that flour is not dissolving, but it's doing, or it's forming something like this, like very, very near dots beside each other like this. And if you left this glass of water to settle down for about 1 hour, you will return back to find that starch settled down leaving water above. Now what is this? This shape is called a colloid. Why? Because the starch molecules are much larger than the water molecules. So I have a starch molecule that has this size. And here is another one. And the water molecule is very poor. It is hidden in between. That's why what we see in the colloid are the starch molecules, not the water. Water is found in between the starch molecules. So how can I know this? You can know only how is the colloid, what's the shape of the colloid, by taking a drop of this mixture. This is a mixture, but is not dissolving at all. I can take a drop of this mixture and look under the light microscope. I will be able to see large molecules only, because the water molecules, of course, are invisible. And the same is true with milk. Milk does not contain starch, but it contains a protein. And again, protein molecules are very large. They are much larger than the water molecule. So if I put milk or milk, this is not a solution. This is again a colloid. And what you see in front of you is the white color of the protein, which is called casein. I can take a drop of milk and put it on the light microscope. I can see large molecules like this. These are the molecules of protein. This is called a colloid. There is another mixture with water that's called a suspension. This suspension, we can see it better because we are learning biology in the blood. We know that blood is formed, majority of blood is formed of plasma. And this plasma contains water, a great amount of water. And also we find the solid part, which are the cells and platelets. It means that the blood is nothing but a mixture between the liquid plasma, the majority of plasma is made of water, and cells together with platelets. They are just floating in water. The flotation of the cells and platelets in plasma, this is called a suspension. But on one condition, that this plasma is moving, we can say that it is a suspension. Now, why do I say this? Because if the plasma is moving with a steady speed as our blood, this means that the blood cells, they are moving with it. Suppose that the plasma lowered its speed or it stopped. You're going to see that all the cells, if this is, for example, a blood vessel, and this is a plasma that stopped movement, you're going to see that all the cells are going to settle down like this. So the difference between the colloid and the suspension, that the suspension must be in a moving liquid medium like the blood. And if it stopped, so all the blood cells are going to settle down. And this is the idea of a certain disease that's called atherosclerosis, which we are going to deal with in chapter 2, inshallah. This is an idea about how the water dissolves materials and how other materials cannot dissolve. But I would like to tell you that I said that there are covalent compounds that can dissolve in water while others cannot. The covalent compounds that can dissolve in water, of course, are the sugars, while the others, the last part, okay, yes, about the covalent compounds or about the plasma? About the plasma, okay. When the plasma is moving, so there is no chance for the blood cells and the platelets to settle down. That's why we are alive, because of the movement of blood in our vessels. If the plasma stopped movement, so all the blood cells will settle on the wall of the blood vessel. And I just said that this is an idea of a certain disease that we are going to learn in chapter 2. Here in order to make a suspension in our bodies, the plasma has to be, or in the blood, the plasma has to be moving with continuous movement, and the movement has to be with a high speed as well. If the plasma slowed down or stopped moving, all the blood cells and platelets are going to settle down, and of course, when the blood stops, this means death, or even due to blockage, for example, of an artery or so. We're going to see all this later. Covalent compounds, I have two types. One type of them can dissolve like the sugars, another type cannot dissolve like the starch. So this is the first property of water, is that it is a universal solvent. It dissolves most of the inorganic compounds or the ionic compounds, and it dissolves some of the covalent compounds. Right. What about the second property of water from the biological point of view back? Water is an excellent transporting medium. We can see this clearly in animals and plants. In plants, we know that water carries minerals all over the plant in order to give the water and minerals to the leaves in order to perform photosynthesis, and also water carries the food that is done by the plant to be distributed all over the body of the plant. Here we say that water is transporting minerals and food all through the plant. What about in animals? Who can tell me what's the transporting medium in our bodies, in the animal body? What's the transporting medium? Can anybody answer this? What's the transporting medium? What's the medium in our body that takes everything to every part of the body? The blood, very good.
Blood and
Yes, thank you.
transfusion.
Thank you, Salman. Thank you, Saif. Habiba, did you know that this is the blood? I think yes. Why didn't you answer? يلا. فالبlood here in animals, it carries everything. And again, it carries everything through its plasma. Why? Because this plasma is formed mainly of water. 90% of the material of plasma is made of water, while the other 10% are the materials that are carried by the blood. Every material has to dissolve in plasma in order to be transported from one place to another in our bodies. That's why water is an excellent transporting medium. And by the way, the property of being a solvent and the property of being an excellent transporting medium, these properties are due to the presence of hydrogen bonds. What about the other property? And let me explain this, and please pay attention to this. Density of water. I'm going to ask you now some questions about physics, about chemistry, because I'm not professional in that. So you are going to tell me. Now, if I have, for example, a lake in a polar area, and we know that the poles, they are very, very cold regions. Suppose this is the lake, the surface of the lake, and of course here there is air. Now, the layer of water that is found above, I'm going to call it layer number 1. The next layer of water is layer number 2. And the third layer is layer number 3. And here is the bottom of the lake. Okay? Now, I just said that this is a polar region. It means that the temperature is lowered all the time. Now, from your physics, when the temperature decreases, what happens to the volume? Will it increase or decrease, ya Habiba? When you cool something, what happens to its temperature?
Please.
Excellent. It will decrease. Thank you. Habiba, will you please type quickly? or Salman unmutes his mic so he can answer very quickly. Thank you. So here the volume will decrease because we have learned that materials or any matter contracts by cooling and expands by heating. Contracts means that the volume will decrease. Now, Habiba is going to answer this one. What happens to the density when the volume decreases? Will the density increase or decrease? The density, yes, excellent. It will increase. Okay, type. Here is the air and the temperature is dropping all the time, and whenever the temperature drops, the volume decreases and the density increases. Because of course the upper layer is the one in direct contact with the air, so the layer number one is the layer that's going to be affected by the temperature changes in the air. So this means that the upper layer of water will decrease in volume and will increase in density. So because increased density means that it becomes heavier, so the upper layer of water will fall down. Of course, the second layer of water is going to replace it. So the second layer will be here the first. And again, it's going to be exposed to the low temperature of air. So its volume will decrease, its density will increase. So again, it's going to fall to be replaced by the third area or layer. This continues, and the movement of the layers of water, convection, yes, of course. But the convection currents, you mean? The convection currents, they happen when the temperature increases. But it is the same, by the way, that the water molecules, they as if they are rotating and replacing each other. Yes. So this continues so long the temperature is decreasing until the temperature reaches 4 degrees Celsius, where everything is reversed. At 4 degrees Celsius, the volume of water will increase. This does not happen in any other matter. In any other matter, the volume will keep on decreasing, but in water only and only water, the volume will increase and also the density will decrease. And as I just said, that the upper layer of water is the one affected by the changes in temperature of the air. So this means that the first layer here will increase in volume and its density will increase. Salman, in this time, will the upper layer sink or it will keep on floating? When temperature reaches 4 and the density decreases, is it going to sink or to float? Okay,
When the temperature decreases and density
decreases as well, because here at 4 degrees, the reverse happens. The volume starts to increase and the density will decrease. What will happen to the first layer of water? Will it sink or float?
will sink.
It will sink. Okay. So what's your opinion, Saif? I'd like to take your opinions. Saif, are you there? Yes, he's here. Yes, you, it will
keep
float.
floating.
Okay. Now, why, Yasif? Why? Because
Its density is lower.
density is lower. You know that density from physics equal mass over volume. So when the mass increases, or when the density increases, this means that the mass is increasing. That's why when, or before 4, or when it was more than 4 degrees, the density was increasing. That's why the upper layers were sinking and replaced by other layers. But here at 4, because the density decreased, it means that the upper layer of water became light. So it's going to float on top. You got that, Habiba and Salman? You got that? Yani the density, when it decreased, it means that the mass of the upper layer was decreasing. It means that it will not sink back. It will keep on floating on top. You
Miss,
understand
can
this?
you return to the second property of water?
The second property is that it is a transporting, excellent transporting medium.
Yeah, I guess.
What do you want from this?
I just want a screenshot.
Oops, I have erased it because this is Zoom. Next time I'm going to use يعني I cannot use it إلا على الPowerPoint. Let me check if I can. I can use, yes. Okay, I'm going to leave the board. I can repeat it.
Yes. Will you send us this video after?
I'm going to ask Mr. Muhammad at the beginning because I'm working with 2 websites. I'm just a second to see if this is recorded. Yes, it is. Okay, okay. I'm going to send you the video. Okay, I'm going to tell him I'm going to send the video. خلاص يا Salman, I'm going to send you the video, so no problem. You're going to see everything. Okay. But that's why I ask you for your emails, please, because I cannot send the video on WhatsApp. You could open it. Yes, yes, Salman. Yes, you said you didn't try.
I could open it, but I needed access. That's it.
Okay, خلاص. Okay, I'm going to send you the video, but in a private message, okay, for everyone. Yes, I have an email, Habiba. If you want it, I can send it to you on WhatsApp على group for all of you, okay? But for the videos, I'm going to send them in a private message. You're welcome. طيب, you understood what I was explaining here, that when the density decreases, it means that the matter is going to float. Please confirm that you understood this. Okay, Salman, did you understand this? Yes, or you want me
Yes.
to repeat? Okay, okay. So at 4 degrees, the volume will increase and the density will decrease. It means that the upper layer is not going to sink back. It's going to float. It means that it's going to be exposed to more and more lowering of temperature until the temperature reaches 0 degrees Celsius. Now, this means that the upper layer, I'm going to erase بقى these, because the upper layer will be kept floating. طب حبيبة, if the upper layer of water was affected by this 0 degrees Celsius, what will happen to the upper layer? It means that its temperature will be
gonna freeze
into, it's going, I couldn't hear you.
when the temperature is 0 degrees Celsius. It's gonna like the upper layer will gonna be freezed.
Freezed, excellent. It's going to change into ice. So what about the lower layers? No, they are not affected by, because there is like something that is acting like a barrier, a great layer of ice on top, so the lower layers of water will remain in the liquid form.
Yeah, it becomes like an isolation layer.
Yes, yes, as if it is isolating, or let me say it acts like a barrier between the air and the lower layers of water. So why is this important from the biological point of view, that this layer changes into ice, keeping the lower layers in the liquid form? Because we have always to remember that this is water. This is a certain habitat for some organisms like fish, like other plants. They're found in the bottom of the lake. So if this layer changed into ice, so these organisms are going to die. That's why the lower layers, they have to stay in the liquid form in order to keep these living organisms living, to prevent the death of living organisms. And by the way, this property of changing everything when the temperature reaches 4, this is only for water. No other kind of matter or any other material can have this change when the temperature reaches 4. This is a very important property for water, for keeping life in such areas, or in the polar areas, for keeping life, or the marine life, or the aquatic life going on. Now let's go to another property of water, which is that water, this was number 4, I think. Water, let me change the color عشان في recording it can be clear. Number 4. Here, water has a high specific heat. This statement means that water can absorb heat slowly and release heat slowly. But let me give you an example. Suppose I have here the sea or an ocean or whatever, any water surface, and here is the sun giving its heat all the time to water. So what you are going to think about is that all the water of the ocean, you have to add capacity at the end. Yes, yes, thank you. Thank you, Saif. I forgot it, by the way. I forgot it to add this word, capacity. Yes, thank you. Thank you. So what you're going to think when the surface of water is always exposed to the heat, it means that water, once upon a time, all the water is going to evaporate. And this means that there will never be water in the seas or oceans, or in rivers, but this does not happen. Why? Because water absorbs heat very, very slowly, and when it absorbs heat, it can release some of it very, very slowly. So why do I say some of it? Because there are creatures living below, plants and animals, corals, whatever. So the water must be warm enough for them. Of course, not very, very warm, but it has to have a degree of heat so that these organisms can be kept alive. And it absorbs water slowly, so to prevent also its fast evaporation. This is again very important. So the water surface does not change easily, and this will allow the continuity of the aquatic life. طبعا I'm going to explain this now. We know that if water evaporates, it needs a very, very high energy in order to break the hydrogen bonds. That's why I told you that most of the properties of water are due to this hydrogen bond. Now, let me explain something here. I just said before that water molecules, suppose this is a water molecule, but no need to draw the hydrogen and oxygen. This is another one, and there is a hydrogen bond between them. So in order to be kept in the liquid form, this hydrogen bond must be present. Now, what if I want to change water into vapor? I'm going to heat or to boil. Boiling means I'm giving water a heat of 100 degrees Celsius. This is very, very great amount of heat. So the hydrogen bonds need very great amount of heat in order to be broken so that the water molecules can be released and escape as a gas. And this gas, of course, is water vapor. It means that if I want to change water in a liquid form into water vapor, I have to boil it to 100 degrees Celsius. This is a very high degree of temperature. You know that other liquids, they evaporate at much lower temperature because there are no hydrogen bonds holding them. But the presence of these hydrogen bonds are the cause of this rising out, allows us to raise the temperature of water to very high degrees like this in order to break the hydrogen bonds to allow the water molecules to escape from each other and to fly away as water vapor molecules or gaseous molecules. So that's why in oceans and rivers and all the water surfaces, it needs a very high temperature so that there is evaporation. Yes, the water of the seas and oceans, they evaporate, yes, and they give clouds later on, but not all the water in the seas and oceans will evaporate because the water needs time in order to absorb heat. This means that they absorb heat very, very slowly until the temperature is suitable for the breaking down of hydrogen bonds. There is another property. It's about, again, hydrogen bonds. The cause are the hydrogen bonds, that the water molecules, or water in general, cannot be compressed. Although I have read once upon a time كده, there is slight compression. But what does this mean? Let me give you an example. Suppose I have a jar like this, or a bottle, or whatever.
You put inside water, but if you try to close it, water will splash out.
Yes, but yes, this is something else that I'm going to explain now. Yes, your what you said is correct, طبعا. This jar is empty. طب Saif, is it empty or it is full of something?
It's full of air.
Excellent. طيب Salman, what about the spaces in between the molecules of air? The intermolecular spaces, are they wide or near or narrow or very, very narrow or what?
They're wide.
Wide, of course. But what if I brought a piston like this and I start compressing and doing a great pressure on these molecules? What will happen? Would this, yes, tell me, I couldn't hear you.
The intermolecular space will decrease due to high pressure.
Of course, because the air molecules or the gas molecules, they have spaces, so they are going to fill the spaces and the spaces will be narrower. And of course, if we kept on compressing, this gas will change into liquid because we are approaching or getting the molecules closer together. Because why did this happen? Because the spaces in between the gas molecules are empty. But what about water? Suppose I have another jar like this. It's important so humans cannot be compressed, right? Of course, طبعا. And not only for humans, ya Habiba. This is very, very important in plant transport of water. Suppose I have another jar and I put some water molecules here. Or some water, طبعا. Oh, this jar is crooked like this. It's not nice. So I'll try to adjust it a bit. So I have here water molecules, and these are the hydrogen bonds, like this. Saif, what about the space in between the molecules? Is it patent or somewhat blocked, or there is a barrier? And what is this barrier if it is present?
Between what again?
Between the water molecules.
Just hydrogen bonds between them.
Yes, of course. So if I try to compress them like this by a piston or a compressor or whatever, so even if the water molecules are trying to be compressed, the hydrogen bond is going to stop them. That's why the water molecules cannot be, the water molecules cannot come in between each other, because there is a hydrogen bond in between that is blocking the way. But in gas, no, everything is empty. All the gas molecules can move wherever they want, because there is an empty space, an open space in front of them. But here the hydrogen bonds are blocking the way. That's why we say that the water molecules cannot be compressed. Even if there is compression, there is slight compression. And this is very, very important in all the hydraulic mechanisms in many living organisms, including plants. Yani, this helps a lot in the rising of water from below upward in the plant, or the movement of the cytoplasm of the plant in order to transport the sucrose or the food of the plant to all parts of the plant body. This property is very important for the movement of water in living organisms. Now, there are other forces that are very, very important in movement of water again, and especially for plants. So what are these? We have two forces. I think this is number 6. I'm going to write them together. We have the water molecules, they are cohesive.
Cohesive and adhesive.
Yes, and adhesive. Cohesion means sticking as if they are stuck together, and adhesion means they can, in here in the plants, adhesion means they can be adherent, or they can touch walls. In other words, they can climb on walls. So let me explain this, for example, on plants. Suppose I have here a xylem. And of course, we know that xylem means the vessels, or the xylem vessel is the tube through which water is moving from below upward to reach the leaves. Suppose I have here water molecules. And I told you before that they are attached with hydrogen bonds, all of them. So if this water molecule is pulled, it will pull with it all the rest of the molecules. This is cohesion. Why? Because all the water molecules, they are stuck together, or they are bound together by the hydrogen bond. So if I pulled one molecule, all the rest are going to follow. And this is very important in the ascending of water through the xylem. But what about climbing on walls? Again, the xylem, it has walls. And I'm going to give you an example that expresses exactly the adhesive force. When you were young, all of you, including me, when we were young, we used to climb the door. This is the door, for example, the opening of the door. And all children did that, including me when I was young. We climbed this. And I want somebody to say, no, I didn't do it. You climbed up the door like this. Who didn't do this? I think everybody's done this. Yes, Habiba, you used to climb the door when you were young? Safe? Of course, طبعا, everybody. And I said, including me. Okay? You could not do it. Neither do I. You know that when I moved for 2 steps, I usually fell on the ground. I couldn't reach the top خالص. Like me, Habiba, I always tried this, but I failed. I never reached the top, never. But the same here, Salman, you didn't mention whether you did this when you were young or not.
Yes, of course. I
Of
used to eat
course,
push-ups.
of course. And maybe
I've
up till
never
now.
fall.
You never, no, I always fell. Right. The same happens with water. Water molecules, as if they are climbing when they are in touch of these walls. So the presence or the friction or whatever between the water molecules and the walls of the xylem allow the water molecules to climb like this, as if they are taking the wall of the xylem as a support to allow them. I just read your message. Yes, you made masters in climbing. طيب. I never did it. Here, all the water molecules, as you can see, they are attached together by these hydrogen bonds. So there are several forces that are pulling water molecules: adhesion and cohesion, or the opposite. Yani here is adhesion, and this pulling is the cohesion. This is a very important, or 2 important properties or forces that allow water to ascend or to rise up the xylem. And again, if you looked here, this is due to the presence of hydrogen bonds again. Type. Now I can explain something which is important again for living organisms. This is, I think, number 7. Yes. That there is a high surface tension for water. Of course, you know from physics this surface tension, but from the biological point of view, I'm going to mention something. If you have a table like this, the surface, and you have a drop of water on top, you're going to see that the drop of water looks like this, as if the upper part of water, or the upper part of the drop of water, as if it is covered by a certain membrane that prevents the water from flowing or floating to the sides. But this is what's meant by the high surface tension, that
It provides a skin-like surface.
yes, of course. So it acts as if it is covered by a membrane or skin on top. Do you know that in lakes or ponds or whatever, there are insects that can stand on the surface of water? For example, mosquitoes.
Pond skaters.
Yes, the pond skater or the mosquito, they can stand. Yani mosquito, most of its life is on water. Like this, it stands on water and it lays eggs on the surface of water. Even when the eggs hatch, the larvae are suspended in water like this, as if there is something on which they can stand. And this is called the surface tension. You can never see this high surface tension for other liquids. Just a second to read what you have written, because the chat box was closed. The bonds between water, strong, of course. Yes, of course. Of course. This was, who said this? Saif, I think. Because they just said from to everyone. Something wrong with this chat box. Wala Habiba, the one that said Habiba. Yes, because I couldn't find your name. There is something with this chat box. Here we say that here we have air molecules. And we know also that from our previous studies that there is attraction between molecules and each other. So air is trying to attract the water molecules, but no way. There are hydrogen bonds that are attracting the water molecules to each other. And the attraction of hydrogen bond is more than the attraction of the air. Hydrogen bonds to the water molecules is more than the attraction of the air molecules to water molecules. So that's why there is a high surface tension. There is still one property, which is that water is acting like a buffer. Or we say that water molecules are amphoteric. Here it means that water acts like a buffer. It means that water can act as an acid or to form hydrogen positive ions if they are found in a basic medium and the opposite. Because we know that water is HOH. This is another form to write water. So if water is found in an alkaline medium, so it lends its positive protons or its positive ions to act like a buffer, or it acts as an acid. If it is found in an alkaline medium, it means that water is going to dilute this or to try to drive this pH into the neutral. And the opposite is true. These OH are negative or alkaline. So if they are found, if water is found in an acidic medium, of course, ya Habiba, bravo, bravo. This will drive them to be neutral. But why is this important for us? As Habiba just said, it helps to maintain the pH of blood, because as we are going to learn later, that the blood pH is slightly alkaline. It's nearly neutral. We say that it is slightly alkaline. And the neutral pH is from 7 to 7.2. The pH of blood is 7.4. So this is very, very near to the pH of water. So the presence of water in plasma adjusts the pH of blood to stay constant like this. So if the blood turned acidic, so the OH that's found in the water of plasma will turn the blood to its normal pH. If the blood became alkaline, so the hydrogen that is found in the water of plasma will return it back to its constant pH. Of course, whenever we find pH changes, always we are afraid about the enzymes that they might denature. Whenever we find something about pH or temperature, so we are dealing with enzymes immediately. But these are the properties of water. Now here are some exam hints that we have to take care of. I'm going to close this chat box because it takes a part of the board. But if you want to write anything, I'm going to open it to read what you say. Here, all these properties are a result of dipoles, or the dipolar nature of water, and the hydrogen bonding between water molecules. And make sure that you can explain the link between the property and the hydrogen bond if you are asked about such a thing in the exam. Always you will get a question anywhere in the exam to relate the structure of molecule, any molecule, to its function. So here, if they asked about a certain property, it means the function, so we have to relate it to the structure of the water molecule. We are going to see, when we solve so many questions, you're going to see this question frequently. Also here in exam questions, the command word discuss suggests that you may need to consider possible negative effects as well as the more obvious benefits to the living organisms, what I was just explaining. What are the positive effects of water molecules on the living organisms and what are the negative ones? Of course, you should never identify the issue that's being assessed within the question. Explore all the aspects of the issue and investigate the issue by reasoning or arguments.